lady friend. Got a minute? Welcome to the Women's Spotlight, Her Light, Her Story, a space where we celebrate women leaders, entrepreneurs, and creatives who are showing up with courage, purpose, and authenticity. I'm your host, Tiffany, and in each episode, we shine a light on her story, the real journey behind the titles, the challenges, and the victories. So today I'm so honored and excited to introduce you to Sarah Fillion. Did I say that right? Or Fillion? Okay. I knew I was going to do it. Fillion, that's correct? Okay. And
Yep.
she is the co-founder of Positive School Solutions. So in our conversation, we're going to learn about Sarah's story and how she shines light on her life's purpose. So grab your coffee or your favorite drink, settle in, and let's step into the spotlight together with Sarah Fillion. How are you doing today, Sarah?
I am great. Thanks so much for having me on your show, Tiffany. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for honoring us with being on the show and agreeing to be on it. So we are, as I said before, very glad to have you with us today. And so we're going to start off by trying to get to know Sarah a little better. So, if someone for the first time met you, how would you introduce the real Sarah?
I would start off by saying I am a lover of life, and my true ambition in life and being here is to do some amazing things, meet amazing people, have enough money to be able to do that, and to do it all in good health. And to me, I feel like that really sums up really what I'm after. And then I would also say, if you're meeting me for the first time, what you should know is that I work really hard with educational leaders and teachers with the goal of making schools a thriving environment where parents and families and students and staff members all want to be. I want to make every single school feel like that school in a school district or in an area where everyone's watching it and is going, what's going on there? What's that magic that they have? And that's really where some of the cool stuff that I feel like I get to do really centers around that.
Well, that is exciting work. And I know from just speaking to you a little bit that your background is in education. So if you'd like to share a little bit about that, we'd love to hear it.
Sure. So I'm one of those people who started off probably by the age of 6, knowing I wanted to be in education, mostly because I had a lot of family members. My mom's a teacher, my grandmothers were teachers, my aunts were all teachers. And so, from a very early age, I had a lot of star pupils, like my teddy bears and my Barbies, and I had them all set up. And I would play school. And then when I had younger cousins available, I was trying to teach them how to read at 2 years old, really trying to flex my teaching skills even then. And throughout my entire journey in education, from both being a student into becoming a teacher, I have been influenced by so many amazing teachers who I just realized I wanted to be like, and they're really the ones who have shaped me. Again, from my parents, my mom in particular as a teacher, all the way to college professors that I had. And so I went into teaching. I taught both third grade and fifth grade in an urban and a suburban area. And then I left the traditional school space and went to work for a nonprofit organization that really focused on leading professional development. And after a while, I noticed a few gaps, and I thought, you know what? It would be really nice to get back into the schools and be working with teachers and principals and school leaders directly. And so that's where part of my half of the reason as to why I started co-founding Positive School Solutions. And since then, we've been able to partner with districts and schools across the country and have really seen some amazing changes, both from staff well-being to overhauling culture, which really makes me so happy.
I'm so glad to hear that. I wish I would have met you when I was on my principal journey because that would have been great to have your work filter into what I was trying to do in that space. So that sounds
Mm.
like exciting work, and it's so great to hear that you came back to it. That you, even though you left, I'm sure you always had that teacher in you, but you decided, hey, I want to come back and do more in that space. So thank you so much for sharing that. So as a co-founder, I know that you're a leader. You obviously have a partner that you're working with. So, and then I'm sure you all have staff that you work with each and every day. So, as a woman who leads her own way, what is the heartbeat behind how you show up as a leader? Whether that, of course, is in your workspace, but also we're leaders in our homes when we're mothers, or even in our community. So, what do you think the heartbeat is behind that, how you show up as a leader?
I think that the heartbeat for me as a leader is leading from the front, really saying, I'm not going to ask you to do something unless I am going to be there with you. And it doesn't mean I'm going to do it for you, but I will not just leave you out there and hang you out to dry and just be like, go ahead, you can do this. I am absolutely going to shower my confidence in your abilities because my goal is always to lift others up higher. I feel like anytime I step into a room, whether it is with my business partner or new clients or a teacher who I'm working and coaching, every single time I feel like one of my strengths is that I can see what people's truest abilities are going to be, and I can see how much they can rise. And so I'm, of course, going to say, I'm going to push you and be like, come on, I know you can get there because I can see it. And I will have the belief in you until you get there, but I'll also be standing right next to you and I'll be helping you out. And I think that that's really the way I try to lead. I'm not going to ask someone to do a sales call unless I'll do the sales call. I'm not going to ask someone to go out into the field and do something unless I'm willing to do that. And so really that's I think the way that I try to live my life.
Mhm. Well, I see the light in you, and so thank you so much for sharing that. And so we know that we have good days, and of course, we're human. We have not so good days. So, what inspires you to show up, being who you are still on those not so good days?
Yeah, so one of the books that I read that has been really influential is called The Space to Lead. And I don't remember the name of the author, unfortunately. And one of the key pieces that she spoke about was we can all build a pause in, even on the most hectic or busy days.
Mm-hmm.
We can still build a pause. And during that pause, the more that we train ourselves to take 3 deep breaths and say, how do I want to show up now to this? Regardless of what happened before us, before this time, how do I want to show up now? And I feel like that has really made a difference in how I show up to a number of spaces because, I'm like you said, like there might have been a morning where I was running really late, and, of course, that would be the day that I let my dogs out and they refuse to come back in, or something. And so they're pushing me even further late. And so at that point, it always becomes a choice. And I will take 3 deep breaths and say, before I enter this meeting, do I want to enter carrying that energy of feeling frantic and frustrated and annoyed? Or do I want to check that right here? And sometimes I'll even like step out of my office and like leave that in the hallway and then step back in and be like, who am I going to be right now? How do I want to show up right now? And I know that as women, we are going from thing to thing to thing. However, when we really start looking, we have time, even if it's not 3 deep breaths, you can take 1 deep breath and you can say, who do I want to be in this moment? Doesn't matter what I was in the last minute, doesn't matter what I'm going to be like in 10 minutes. In this next moment, who do I want to be? And I feel like what that allows us to do is to live our lives more authentically because we're not carrying around that regret of, oh, my morning was junk and then I showed up here and I carried that energy and now I feel bad because I said this or I did that or this happened. And instead we can say, yep, that happened. One of my favorite, quick story, one of my favorite
Sure.
visuals that I always get is when I was younger, often had a very pessimistic attitude and would feel like if one thing happened bad, the rest of the day was shot.
Mhm.
And I remember my mom once gave me a dozen eggs, and she said, at the end of the day, you have to make a brownie. You have to make a pan of brownies. And I said, okay. And so it was a day that it was like a Saturday, and I was probably in middle school that she taught me this. It was a while ago, but I've never forgotten it. And so I remember something happened, and I was like, oh, like I hate this. And I went into typical middle schooler, like, this is awful. This is the worst. And so my mom took an egg out of my egg carton and she threw it on the ground. And I was like, what are
Oh.
you doing? And she said, "Yep, you just ruined that egg. That egg, that moment was bad, right? Like it's gone." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Can you still make brownies at the end of the day?" And I said, "Yeah, I only need 2 eggs." And she said, "Okay." And so then I didn't get the lesson. So then a little while later, something else happened. And again, I was ranting and raving and throwing a middle school tantrum. And my mom took 2 eggs and she chucked them on the ground. And she said, "Yep, those two moments are gone. Those were not good moments. Do you still have enough eggs to make brownies at the end of the day?" And that is what I now go to is if I start having a bad day, I'll like picture either myself or my mom throwing an egg on the ground and being like, "Yep, that moment was not good, but I still have 11 eggs in my day, or I only need 2 eggs to show up at the end of the day to make some brownies.
Mm-hmm.
I only need 2 eggs. Luckily, I've never run out of eggs."
Well, I love that story. Actually, what I'm doing is writing down some of what you said because a lot of times I always want to make sure when we present, when this video is up and running, that we'll have something that we can share. And I love that story. And then how your mom even thought to do that. Because I'm sure at first you probably was like you said, what happened right here? She just threw an egg on the ground.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it makes such a valid and a mental visual point. And I love how you say you can go back to that now and use
yeah.
that same scenario to know that, okay, I can get through this day. Something may not have happened that I'm liking, or I may not be who I want to be in this moment, but I can change that in the next one. I love that. So thank you for sharing that. I've
You're
never heard
welcome.
that.
Yeah.
That is really neat. Okay, well, so as I just stated, that's so neat to the point I want to now lead us into a moment of when you think about how you can reset or recharge, because we all know that we need to take care of ourselves in order to do the best job possible that we can do. So we know that self-care can look different for every woman. How do you create a space for yourself whenever you start to feel that heavy feeling, or that you feel like, okay, I might need to throw an egg on the ground?
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah. So I think I have two go-to strategies. My first one is if I have the time and space. So, if you are in the middle of a work day, whether that's in a school system or in some corporation or for yourself, you might not, with yourself, you probably have a little bit more of this wiggle room, but you
Mhm.
might not have this space all the time. For me, it's I have to move my body, and so I'll go for a walk. And I will let my husband know which direction I'm going, but I don't bring my phone. And so I'm like, I am just going to disconnect. And sometimes it's as simple as walking a little bit down the road and then turning around and coming back. It doesn't, I'm not trying to go out and set miles and miles of walking. But that one is really good. The fresh air, the getting outside, the moving my body, that for me just instantly gets me back into a right headspace. And while I'm walking, I usually have the rule of I can't perseverate on what I was just thinking about. I can't keep going over it and thinking about it. And so a lot of times what I'll end up doing is just walking around and just starting off really superficially, but I'll just be like, wow, I'm so grateful. I'm in New Hampshire. So right
Mhm.
now, I'll be out walking and I'll be like, I'm so grateful for the snow and how beautiful it is. And it looks like diamonds have been thrown all over my lawn.
Hmm.
Or, oh, look at the way that the light is coming through that tree. Or, I'm so grateful that I have this quiet road that I can walk on. And, so I just start doing that. And that gets me into a better headspace. And usually by the time I get back, either if I've been working on a question and I had to stop because I was stumped,
Mhm.
or if I was super frustrated, usually without even thinking about it, I come back and I'm like, oh, I should try this. This is a much better path to try. And it's so much easier than if I had sat there and kept trying to push and be like, what should I do now? What should I do now?
Mm-hmm.
The other strategy that I use when I don't have that time, whether it's because I have back-to-back meetings or because I have, something else happening, I will either just do a quick like box breathing of breathe in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I do have time, I'll like put on one song and like have like a quick little mini dance party and be like, okay, like I'm going to shake this energy off. I'm going to get some new energy into me and really start the next part of my day in a better headspace that way. And I think that either way, like there are times when I come home from having been in a school that I'll even like stop on my driveway and listen in the car to like one good like pump me up song to be like, okay, like I know I'm making that transition from having been out of the house and at work, and now I'm going back home, and I know everyone in my house is going to want my attention. And so how do I go in there with good energy and not worrying about, like, oh, but I need to put my book bag away, or I need to respond to this, or I need to put the final touches on that, and instead show up and be like, I can give you my energy for an hour and then I can go do those other tasks and everything will be okay. And that helps me to start moving because we don't have the ability to balance is so hard and to me it's impossible. But
Mm-hmm.
what I think we can do as women, because we're magical beings, is
Of
we
course.
yes, because we can flow. And so if we stop thinking about how do I balance, of how do I give work and life and spirituality and health and all of these different things, how do I give them all the same amount of time so that they are in balance? I think that notion is outdated. And what I think can happen is we can say, these are the most important things to me. And so throughout my day, when am I going to meet my health? How am I going to meet my health?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it is a 2 minute or a 5 minute walk, or maybe it is going to bed 5 minutes earlier. It doesn't have to be some grand gesture. Or maybe it's I'm going to eat one piece of fresh fruit today. Like it doesn't have to be some grand thing. But if we flow, if we think about flowing instead of saying, like, so when I come home, what's actually most important is meeting everyone in my house and being here and like bringing in a good energy.
Mm-hmm.
Then I can flow back into now that I've had that met and I haven't had this tension or this like struggle of trying to do something. Now I can then focus in and come in and do my office work that will probably take me half the time that it would have if I had come in and was like, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do this. I would have had dogs jumping on me. My husband would have been asking me questions, like I would have been really distracted. So it probably would have taken me an hour. And instead, I had a much more enjoyable hour and a half between doing those two things.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just wanted to say, and ladies, you all listen, that Sarah has some great strategies, and just listening to you is inspiring me to do better. I think what happens is, like you stated, we just we think it's a certain way we're supposed to do something, and if we don't do it that way, we haven't fulfilled the goal or the expectation. But as you just said, doing a small step can really bring a lot of clarity and just, I like to call it a woosah moment. And
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that with us. So,
Absolutely.
I'm hoping that, the audience is hearing it so they all take some of these steps now. So you kind of answered this a little bit. The question was like, when you are out of alignment, how what in life what knocks you back in that alignment? You've kind of told us that by listening to what
Hmm.
your routine is when you get home. So if you can think about, because we're now going to kind of break into resilience.
Yeah.
So getting into a comeback moment from something that may have been challenging in your life. Um, what makes you grateful for maybe having gone through that moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, my example is I had this great marketing idea for my company, and my business partner was on board, and it cost us a lot of money, and we ran it by a whole bunch of people, and everybody was like, this is it, like you are just going to explode with this.
Mhm.
And so we sent out these beautiful mailers and they were a complete flop. And it was really disheartening. We were doing everything that every marketer had ever told us we needed to do. We were following up. It was personal. We were making calls. We were doing everything. And it was this really defeating moment to be like, wait, we've read the manual. Like everyone says that this is the playbook and we have followed the playbook to a T. So why isn't it working? And so in that moment, I think what was challenging was that it wasn't just myself who had to rise back up, but I also was there as part of a team effort with my business partner. And I needed to make sure that she also was able to rise back up.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that we did that, really, my secret, which is not so much of a secret, is gratitude, is going back through and being like, okay, so what can we learn from this? It wasn't all a failure. It wasn't 12 eggs crashing on the ground, like it felt like it was 11, but it wasn't 12. And so then we started looking and we were saying, so what's the one egg that we still have here? And then as we started doing that, we realized that while we thought we had dropped 11 eggs, we really had more eggs in the carton than what we thought we had. But it was that moment of gratitude, of really just looking and being like, I am grateful for this experience. What can I learn from it? And I think that is the key piece is, for me, it really is, I had to drop my ego. Like my ego could stay bruised and could be like, man, this is really tough.
Mm-hmm.
But instead I was able to be like, so how can I come back better next time? If I was going to do this again, what would I do differently? How would I do it? What would make it a success this next time? And so I feel like all of that, just really focusing in on what is the lesson that I could learn and what am I grateful for? So, started off to my business partner and saying, I am so grateful that I had this idea and you just picked it up and you just were like, let's go. And, I can't express more gratitude for having someone in your life who just is like, they're not just like a yes, they're like a heck yes. Like they are like a let's go. And so for that in and of itself was just going back to that and being like, wow, like how cool is that I had that? And I feel like I've been able to do that across the board. And almost every time that I've needed to rise back up, it has been being able to look at people around me and being like, how awesome is it that, yeah, I got to do this, and at least I got to say I tried to do this. Think of how many people would never even try to do whatever it was, like, I mean, I can tell you about all kinds of them. Like I've run countless marathons, and maybe not countless, I've run six. So that's enough. That's a high enough count for me. But I remember my very first one, my grandmother came down, it was the Boston Marathon, and she came down to watch me. And she was standing with my mom, and of course, the elite athletes go running by. And my grandmother turns to my mom and she goes, do you think Sarah knows she's not going to win this race? And it was the most heartfelt thing that my grandmother thought I was going to win the marathon. Like, I think that's like the
That's the
kind
faith
of
she
thing.
had in you.
Yeah, yeah. But like at the end of that, like, yeah, that marathon was really a challenge and really a struggle. And I didn't win. That it wasn't a failure because I finished it up. And still the lesson I was able to look at was how cool is it that I had grandparents who were there watching me from northern New Hampshire, that I had my parents there, my sister there. I had all kinds of college friends who showed up. Like I was like, that's a really cool thing. And I think it goes back to the way I said I would introduce myself of like, that's me living my life. Like I'm doing cool stuff. Like how many people would never even try running a marathon? And I was like, I'm going to try it. And, I've also run marathons where I started running it and then I had to drop out for one reason or another. So,
Mhm.
technically that is called a failure of the marathon, but I don't look at it as that way. I just say, what I learned is I learned to listen to my body and not push myself so hard that I got a serious injury. I just had a minor injury, or I trusted my instinct and something told me that this wasn't my race to run. And I stopped. And you know what? Look at all the cool people that I still had near me who were showering me with love, and I still have my health. And I
Mhm.
had enough money, just enough money to do it, and so I feel like that really goes back to my kind of my mantra of life.
Mhm. I love that. Wow. You're very, I know that I've said the word before, but you're very inspiring just to listen to talking to you. I can bet that when you were in the classroom, your kids loved you talking to them. I'm sure you pepped them up really well with pep talks, I'm sure. Um, So, with that being said, you've kind of talked a little bit about this too, but thinking about the mindsets that we need to have or the routines that keep us centered so that we can pour into others. And you've
Yeah.
really hit that almost in everything you've said in this session today. But if you want to elaborate a little bit more on maybe a specific mindset you might do or a specific routine that you want to share as you pour into others, but you've been great with sharing that with us all along.
Sure. So I would say that my number one routine that I would say for anyone who wants to stay resilient when you are leading or caring for others is you have to find time in your day to make your own joy. If you don't make time to find joy, you are never going to find it.
Mhm.
And it's so much easier, especially at this day and age with our social media and cell phones and people can just pepper us all the time. There's never really an off time. And so unless you are making the time to say this is something that is joyful to me. So one of the practices that I use in my well-being course that I teach really is all around let's find some 30-second or even 10-second moments of joy. So 10-second moments of joy could be, for me, it's like if I have it available, like petting a dog. Like as soon as my hand hits the fur, I'm just like, yep. Like for somebody else, it could be looking at their child and just giving them like a really quick smile and making that eye contact. It can be, like I'm looking around at my desk right now and I have like post-it notes and pictures and things. And it can be just looking at that and allowing yourself to get into the headspace of, oh, remember when we went on that bike ride? Or remember when I was doing this or that? And just giving yourself just permission to sit there for 5, 10 seconds. And when you are able to find more joy for yourself and you're able to build more joy into your days, then you're really carrying that over. And so when you are caring for others, when you are leading others, you lead with that joy, and that is contagious. And that's really the energy that I want to be spreading. And one of my grandmothers was a huge she loved to bake and she loved to cook. And as most people, they'll be like, no one can cook as good as my mom or my grandma. Like everyone kind of has that in your family. And for my grandmother, I remember like she told me, she was like, I never cook in a kitchen when I'm angry because people will taste it. And she said, I want my food to taste of love and of happiness. And so she's like, I come in here, and she used to make the most intricate desserts that would take hours upon hours to make. And it tasted so delicious. And I would be like, oh, it must be because you spend so much time and you go through the recipe so carefully. And she was like, no, it's just because I do it when I'm really happy and people can taste that. And I feel like that's not
Wow.
only just in food, but I feel like, if you come into when you're leading a podcast, like when you come in and you're feeling more joyful, you bring joy out of your interview as well.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And yes, I do. Today was a tough day, starting off, but it's been so much more lightened since I've gotten the chance. And really, I'm not just saying that to talk to you. You really have brought even though we're virtual, into the space that I'm in where I'm like, I feel uplifted.
Oh, good.
Okay. Well, before we wrap up, I want to ask you maybe two more questions, if you don't mind. What would you say to a woman who's forgotten how bright she really is? She might have had her light dimmed for different reasons. What is something you would share with her?
I would say talk to a good friend who you connect with, any person, and literally ask them, "Can I borrow your belief in me today?"
Oh my goodness.
And the moment that you do that, you no longer have to try to believe in yourself because you know that your best friend or your mom or whoever it is,
Hmm.
that you've got their belief. And like what is more powerful than that? To have someone else's belief in you, and like that can carry you a long way. And I feel like when you get that, then later on you'll see that your light is no longer dimmed, and then you can also share your light to others, and you can say, you know what, you can have my belief in you today.
Love that. Great. Another great answer. And then, and then we all, of course, because we have had experiences, I like to say that we have Tapestry by Design is the name of
Yeah.
the um, the company that I'm leading through this, and I always think about this being as a beautiful tapestry created by God. And the experiences that we have are the threads that are woven together to make us who we are. So I know I would only think my younger self, I'm nowhere near what I was doing as a younger self that I am as an older self, but that's now because of the experiences and the growth that I've made. So if you had to whisper to your younger self, what would be something that you would tell her today?
I love that question. Um, I think I honestly would just say thank you. Thank you for every decision that you are about to make. And just know that whatever decision you make is absolutely the right one for you. And it will lead you to great places. And I think that that could be really powerful to, again, kind of like the previous question, almost being able to give myself my own belief, but to my younger version self of being like, it's all going to be okay. And it
Mhm.
is, it's all going to be okay.
Wow, well, it has been a great time to get to know you and listen to your story. Thank you so much for joining us on the Women's Spotlight, Her Light and Her Story. I love the conversation that we have, and I hope to our audience and maybe to your listeners as well that you all have learned something in today's conversation with Sarah that's inspired you. I mean, I've learned a lot that has inspired me, and that you keep your light shining and you walk confidently in your own story. So, if you love this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, and join me next time as we continue to celebrate the incredible journeys of women like you. And until then, keep showing up, keep growing, and keep shining. And see you later, my lady friend. So, thanks again, Sarah.
Thank you, Tiffany.